Welcome on Texas Football. I'm Bobby Burton, joined special guest Doug Karsch, play-by-play voice of the Wolverines. How you doing, Doug?
I'm doing great, Bobby. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it has been. We just talked about it in the pre-comments here, you and I. It's probably been 25, 30 years since you and I really got together. I used to cover recruiting nationally. You were, I think, on WTKA out of Ann Arbor.
Yep.
And
we got Bobby Burton on. It was a big deal, man. People would fax over questions, Bobby. I was taking faxes. They wanted to know, was Quincy Woods coming to Michigan?
Rashid Simmons. Those guys.
That's right.
You remember that, right?
You landed Trevor Price. We couldn't believe it.
I appreciate you taking the time, Doug, out of your busy day. You have a radio show now, I believe, as well during the mid-mornings. There in Michigan. So thank you so much. All right, got to ask you, big year last year.
Yep.
For the University of Michigan. Game coming up against the Longhorns. You know, from afar, down in Texas, you're looking and seeing what's happening at Michigan. The Harbaugh turmoil goes to L.A., turnover of a lot of the staff members, et cetera. What's it been like in Ann Arbor over the last 6 to 9 months? And do you think they're on firm footing now, or is there still a little bit of tenuousness about the situation at Michigan?
So, look, all throughout what happened last year, I was talking to people on the inside that said, well, there's more to come. There's more to come. If the details came out. And sort of near the end of the season, I was told, all right, that's it. As far as our investigation is concerned, we think that everything that is super damaging is out. And we don't think it's a nuclear scenario. The worst case scenario would be, of course, tying it to coaches. And that was part of some grand scheme. And what my analysis of what happened here is they had a very ambitious young analyst who was one of these guys that was never going to take no for an answer and didn't really understand boundaries. But as I understand now, the NOA that came over from the NCAA wasn't the nuclear scenario. It did not tie coaches to this scheme. It's still, it's something that kind of hovers, but it's not. The people that told me, when there was more to come out are now telling me, yeah, that's kind of it. Of course, the internet's crazy with rumors. I mean, it is impossible to sift through them all. And you know how this works is somebody says, well, I heard, and then that multiplies. And the truth is, it's an embarrassing chapter, but it feels like the worst is behind him. And then as far as the current stability, Sharon Moore is so level-headed and seems to be has the players' attention, seems to be handling this all that stuff about as well as one could. But he's really brought a sense of calm over the whole thing, which is kind of refreshing. With Jim Harbaugh in charge, while he is a great football coach, it was chaos, man. There was stuff coming at you from every direction, and I'd sit down to do pregame radio shows with him. And sometimes I would ask 4 questions in 10 minutes, and sometimes I'd ask 40 questions in 10 minutes. You just never knew what you were going to get. But there was a method to his madness. It's funny because I see his press conferences now with the Chargers and go, yeah, now it's up to their media people to sort out what the hell he's talking about, because that's just Jim. But hey, I think Jim thrives in those atmospheres and seems to like rattling cages, and things have kind of calmed down since he left. So now we see if the winning continues.
Yeah, that's a big one. I think the Wolverines won 23 straight at home. Texas trying to go in there, come out with a win. Texas favored by 7 in this game. That's up from 3.5 prior to the first game of the season. Trying to kind of understand why the point spread moved that much. And I know I don't want to sit here. I'm not a gambling show or anything like that, but that's a lot of movement. What happened in that first game, in your opinion, that would have given some people in Vegas thoughts that, hey, Texas might be able to win here a little bit stronger? Is there anything that you took away from that Michigan game where you're like, ooh, this may be not look as good as last year? Or any other comments you might have.
Yeah, I mean, look, Texas put up a huge point total and ran away from an overmatched opponent, and Michigan didn't. I think it's pretty much that simple. Michigan was in a one-score game in the fourth quarter, and that's when they actually started to play their best football as far as wreaking havoc defensively. They committed some penalties, and they had some guys in the depth chart in the game when Fresno went on a scoring drive, and then they committed penalties after that. But the reality was it kind of when it got to be 16-10, then Michigan put together that drive where they were handing the ball off and getting chunk yardage, and then went with the big play to Colston Loveland. But, they had so much to replace offensively, and the question was, can the defense, and it really applies to this Saturday, can Michigan's defense keep Michigan in the game while the offense tries to find its footing? And they really like the Davis Warren kid. He's an unbelievable story. Basically losing the bulk of his junior year to leukemia and then his senior year to COVID. Didn't have much tape, sent it out to Jim Harbaugh. He decided to walk on at Michigan and came in J.J. McCarthy's class, which is either bold or crazy, right? As a walk-on quarterback. But people said he's got a high Division I arm. He's just short on experience. And he made some great throws, honestly, on Saturday, and they say he doesn't practice all the time. But I also think his inexperience showed at times. Maybe not understanding the difference between a collapsing pocket and a collapsed pocket, like getting rid of the football a little bit sooner than he needed to. He wasn't in sync with his wide receivers. But I mean, it takes reps. And everybody in the Michigan passing game, every single person, with the exception of Colston Loveland, who had the huge game, the tight end, was in a new role. The two guys that were sort of options 3 and 4 in the passing game are now 1 and 2. Quarterback who was a backup is now in charge. The entire offensive line, all replacing last year's offensive line, even though a lot of these guys played and filled in here and there and have more experience. But, offensive line is all about communication and familiarity with one another. So they were the somewhat expected hiccups. It's funny because leading up to the first game on the talk show, I kept talking about it's Michigan's defense and special teams that have to keep them in games while the offense is figuring it out. And then after game 1, all I've got is doom and gloom from Michigan fans who can't believe how bad it was. And I'm like, that's what it looks like. That's what it looks like when the defense has to keep you in games and the special teams have to play well while your offense is figuring it out. This is what figuring it out looks like. Now, unfortunately for Michigan, in week 2, they get a big boy opponent, which is great, by the way. I love the Michigan Texas. I mean, this feels like the kind of stuff that was never going to happen, and now it happens in modern football. Now, I don't love conference expansion, but I love this part. I love that you can play this game, and now the good news is if you lose this game, your season's not derailed. So I can't wait to come to Austin.
Yeah, look, I'm with you on this, Doug. This is what college football is supposed to be about. Two of the most storied programs in college football history getting together. I mean, the Rose Bowl in 2004 was phenomenal, and I hope this weekend is great too. I want to ask you about the Michigan defense because you look at it on paper and you see it on film from last year, at least. They can be suffocating, absolutely suffocating. Talk to me a little bit about their defensive front, and what they've done in the secondary because they lost a couple pieces, one of them to an ACL tear, one of them to the draft last year. Tell me a little bit about the Michigan defense, if you don't mind.
Well, you're right. This is the strength of the team. Up front, their starters will go NFL, 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 NFL. 2 of them are probably first rounders. The other 2 might be. I mean, they are loaded. It reminds me of what they've done on the defensive line the last half dozen to 8 years is reminiscent of the Miami Hurricanes defensive lines. Wow. And they have been, you remember back in the day with the Cortez Kennedy and Russell Maryland groups. And they have just, you start thinking about the defensive linemen that they've put in the NFL, from Aiden Hutchinson to David Ajabo to Josh Uche to Chase Winovich to Maurice Hurst to Mozzie Smith, Chris Wormley, Taco Charlton. I mean, they've had elite defensive linemen at the collegiate level that have all gotten shots in the NFL. And, that just keeps rolling with this group. And, for Michigan to have a chance, they're going to have to be exceptionally good against Texas's very good offensive line. In the secondary, you mentioned Rod Moore, who tore his ACL. I thought this year's defense was going to be better than last year's defense. They have a huge transfer in the middle that we'll get into in a minute. But losing Rob Moore is a big blow. They have Quentin Johnson, a graduate student who has made some big plays in big games, huge plays in the national championship game, huge play against Ohio State, who's kind of getting the majority of the run now next to Makari Page, who's great in run support. But the linebacking position got Jayshawn Barham, who was an elite playmaker at Maryland when he didn't have All-Americans in front of him and All-Americans behind him. And so getting him is a big deal. And he was, as advertised in the opener, they're going to lean on him a lot. And then Will Johnson's the All-American who had the house call in the opener. And he's just a great cover corner. And you could see him baiting Mikey Keene, the Fresno quarterback, all game long. So, the defense is as advertised, it appears.
Yeah, Will Johnson looked freaky as a freshman. I thought he was tremendous. I tell you what, Doug, you've been around Michigan football for a long time. What are your thoughts on where Michigan is headed this season? I mean, do they have the quarterback play to repeat, or is this hey, we want to try to get to the Big Ten title game kind of team? You know what I mean? Because I don't. You lose J.J. McCarthy, you lose your running back, you lose Roman Wilson, you lose a couple of those defensive players and all the entire starting offensive line. You're not thinking repeat in Ann Arbor. You don't.
No, right? I think this team, the legitimate goal is to try and make the playoff. Okay. And look, worst case scenario, if the offense never comes around, they are Iowa from last year. Elite defense, struggles offensively, and that Iowa team would have come dangerously close to making the playoff under this year's format. So, that's the worst case scenario. I worry less about the quarterback after one game than I do offensive line and elite playmakers on the outside. I mean, you know how this is. Sometimes you don't always open up the entire playbook. Sometimes you don't show everybody what you have in week one. Fresno is going to win 8-9 games and challenge Boise in the Mountain West. So they had to be careful in that game. But from what I've seen, the offensive line has to get healthy quickly in terms of their play, not healthy physically, but they have to take some steps forward in a hurry. And their wide receivers need to make some plays and help their quarterback out. If I had to guess, I think the quarterback is going to be fine. He won't be J.J. McCarthy good, but I think he'd be good enough to win a championship. Bigger concerns are playmakers on the outside and an offensive line. They have an NFL tight end in Colston Lumley.
Oh, yeah. And love that kid.
He's out of the woods of Idaho. And keep this in mind, he was the offensive MVP of the Sawtooth Central Conference in the middle of Idaho. And I love that.
Yeah, he's a great player. Like I think Michigan has one of the things I've been telling folks at Texas or that follow the university is Michigan has a couple of dudes, really great players. Like Loveland is one of those. I think Mason Graham is one of those. You could say Will Johnson's in that category, maybe a couple of other defensive linemen. You're talking about this linebacker now.
Yep.
They've got some dudes, and those guys can make difference, particularly at the collegiate level, even though Texas, like you mentioned, they're talented. Longhorns are talented themselves, so it'll be interesting. All right, Doug, any last comments you want to make for Texas fans out there? You think?
I got to tell you, I expect to see Texas fans in numbers. I've been told that this is the toughest ticket in Michigan football history, and it's because the burnt orange fans are going to want to come up here and represent and see the big house. And we've been privy to Michigan Ohio State games. I've been to more of them than I can count, and it's a great tradition. And it's so much fun to be a part of. But this is such a unique experience. I look forward to seeing Texas fans. There's so much respect that people up here have for the Texas program. And I really look forward to welcoming Texas fans. I think Michigan's fan base is a little bit more welcoming than maybe some of our Big Ten rivals are.
Ohio State, not so much, guys.
Yeah. I just heard stories. Yeah. I heard stories and I've seen it firsthand. I was a sideline reporter before I got to do play-by-play. And one game I decided I was decking head to toe in Michigan gear, Michigan backpack, just so I could lean into what it was really like. And I got spit on. My stuff was covered with spit. It was awful. But I mean, I kind of asked for it. So at the end of the day, I hope Texas fans have a great trip to Ann Arbor. I hope you found rooms in Ann Arbor. If you're staying on the outskirts, come into the town, get on South University, get on State Street, get on Main Street, and really experience it. It is a fun place for college football. It takes over Ann Arbor on game days. I love personally, it's a noon start. I'm a noon start fan. I know not everybody is, but I love the noon start. So I really hope Texas fans have a great experience in Ann Arbor, because I think people here are much more welcoming and excited to have you aboard. So, and I can't wait to go down to Austin.
All right, Doug, speaking with Doug Karsch, play-by-play for Michigan football, longtime friend. I've known you for so long. Feels crazy that we're talking here on this channel right now. Doug, you have a good one, and I hope to see you on Saturday, buddy.
Yep, come by and say hi.
All right, will do, man.